makes you stronger. Because today we're going to talk to the leaders of two large businesses that were really at the front lines of the pandemic, and the shock that those companies faced and their large organizations faced were probably the most intense any business could have faced. So, with that background, what we want to really understand from them today is what are the first responses that they had. Then it's been now 2 years, and in these 2 years, we've seen dramatic shifts in how consumers interact with businesses, interact with the digital world, and there's a whole new set of expectations consumers have begun to have. And how are they then now reconfiguring their businesses, retooling their teams, and how do they see the future pan out? So I'll jump into the topic straight without much ado. Uh, Both these gentlemen need very little introduction, but let me do my duty in any case. We have Deep Kalra, who I would call the founding father of the Indian travel industry. I mean, he's the 20 years of Make My Trip almost disrupted the whole travel industry, faced immense competition over the last 2 decades, and has stayed on tops. And it's a massive achievement to build and run such a large enterprise in such a highly competitive segment. And then we have Damodar Mal. Again, I would call him the midwife of the modern retail industry. Actually, the industry started. He's seen it grow from uh, the kirana stores that were the only way consumers could actually buy their daily products. And today we see a vibrant modern retail industry in India. There is DMart, there is Reliance, there's Future Group, there is a massive number of other formats that are coming in and are already there. Metro, Shoppers Stop, you can name the number of firms. And that transformation Damodar has seen firsthand of this industry. And therefore, you've got two veterans who run large enterprises. And while these enterprises are large, I almost call them that they're still in startup mode, because what's really happening is that their customer behavior and habit is constantly going change. They're under constant competitive threat. The landscape is shifting. They are the disruptors in that sense. They themselves are digital companies, and they're facing digital, let's say, attack. And the consumer is constantly evolving and shifting behavior, brands, purchase patterns. So therefore, in the sense that they have to constantly keep running, and in that scenario where they were already under tremendous pressure, the pandemic hit. So let me start with Deep first. Deep, I think your business really took it on the cheek. Actually, if you could, use a boxing parlance here, that you really got, in a sense, knocked out in the pandemic. How was it? How were the initial days of the pandemic?
Yeah, firstly, thank you for having me here. It's indeed a pleasure to be here, and lovely to be chatting with you, Harish, and with you, Damodar. So yeah, I think it's right to say, Harish, that if there was one business that was delivered the knockout punch by the pandemic, it was the travel business for obvious reasons, right? And a couple of other businesses in the same kind of realm. My friend Ajay Bijli, who runs PVR, always says he's been hurt more. So we can keep debating who's hurt more, but the fact is that in any business where people have to congregate and be together, move together, are going to get hit the worst. And we are still being tossed about in the different waves of the pandemic. When waves come down, we've managed to do well. When they're bad, they're terrible. So the first one was just terrible. I mean, it's hard to forget that date when our Prime Minister announced national lockdown, March 24th, 2020 in India. We had some warnings coming from China and other parts of the world. Like true Indians, we took none of those warnings seriously. We said, हाँ इंडिया में नहीं हो सकता. I think we all
Correct.
remember that. इंडिया में गर्मी बहुत है, मार देगी वायरस को. इंडिया में
BCG
लोगों
वैक्सीन लिया है हमने.
हमने BCG वैक्सीन लिया है, and many other things. We have gone through dengue, we have gone through all this. ये क्या चीज है, kind of thing. So we were in denial despite it moving from China to Italy to Iran to Spain. It was going all over the world, and we were still, I think, fair to say, some of us started experimenting with partial work from home, but we were caught with our pants down despite that. And we were scurrying around like headless chickens trying to figure out what to do because when there was national lockdown, it obviously meant no flights except those very emergency ones, no hotels except quarantine hotels. So our business came to a standstill. And the quarter being public in the US on NASDAQ, we report quarter on quarter. So the quarter we reported for April, May, and June 2020, it's, as you would know, Harish, it's called an earnings call. And I
Correct.
started the call by saying this should be called a lack of earnings call. My investors did not find it funny.
Really?
We were 96% down on revenue, 96% down. So we were obliterated. Obviously, we reacted as quickly as we could, and we started cutting costs wherever we could. The easiest to cut were the discretionary spend, so marketing was completely slashed, obviously, in such a time.
I think the
But
link is
many
giving
other
some.
areas, can you hear me clearly?
Yeah, no.
Okay,
Damodar,
sorry.
are you online?
Yes,
You
I
can hear
am.
us clearly.
I
Okay,
hope.
sorry. I think there was some loss of transmission there. Deep, you'll have to roll back a minute.
Sure. So one had the unenviable task of reporting a quarter in which we were down 96%. You heard me right,
Yeah, yeah.
96% down,
Uh-huh.
because revenues were completely gone. They all
Zero.
evaporated. Our main
So
lines
what was
of
the
business.
internal impact? All of us sitting outside can read the external impact on your firm and on your industry, and that was clear. I mean, you have teams, there are vice presidents, there are general managers, there are CEOs, there are COOs. I mean, there's a whole organization
Yeah,
structure.
yeah.
What happens internally? Because remember, there is the externality of the firm, there's the internality, and there is this synchronicity that you continue to build as you build a company. But then when it suddenly breaks down, what happens internally? What are the first steps you took?
You're absolutely right. That is the biggest challenge always, because any company is a living organism of multiple parts, and it's all people, right? I think it's
Correct.
fair when we say that every evening all our assets walk out of the door. It's a reality today. Of course, they every evening they check out of the Zoom, but
Hmm.
that's the reality. That's what makes our companies. There's nothing else. We don't have factories, etc., etc. Sure, we have a brand and a website, but all of that will decay very quickly if we don't keep on re-energizing it. So I think while we were cutting costs at the same point of time, we were also very conscious of taking care of our people. But at
Hmm.
the same time, we had to even bring down fixed costs. Even on the people side, it became very clear that sooner or later we'll have to. For 2 months, I resisted. And then after 2 months, me and my co-founder Rajesh, we took a call, very hard call, but certain lines of business which were going to take forever to come back or perhaps never be the same again. The MICE
Hmm.
business, which is meeting, incentive,
Correct.
conferences, events. We had 20 retail stores. We realized
Hmm.
people aren't going to go to retail stores, so we turned them all into franchisees. A few other such businesses which were high touch point and very international travel in nature, we did have to let go of 10% people. But we
Hmm.
decided we'll do it once and never again. So it
Hmm.
was in my 21 years at Make My Trip, clearly the toughest and the worst decision. But at the same point of time, we made sure everyone else is reassured that, listen, A, you're not losing jobs.
Correct.
Senior management came forward, which is in true, I can say with a lot of pride, true Make My Trip style, and they offered to take deep cuts.
Hmm.
So really deep cuts. At the top, of course, 100% cuts, but then down the line, and we've done it in the past as well. So I think it's part of our culture. This time
Hmm.
we were able to give it back after the first wave because we did well. We managed to come back well, profitable quarters. We raised some capital, etc. So we gave it back when we could, but there were no promises made. But I was
Hmm.
heartened to see about 100 senior managers take cuts ranging from 25 to 50% of their comp because the company needed it.
Okay.
And no one really in the top level left at all. No one left. They all realize it's a tough time. Maybe it's culture. I'd like to
Hmm.
believe it's the culture we've built up because most of our people are actually non-travel people in the senior levels. They're very
Hmm.
fungible skills. These are product and tech and everything
Correct.
else, and they can move anywhere. But thereafter, it's been a bloodbath over the last year and a half when it comes to technology, and it's not just us. I
Yeah,
think
yeah. It's there everywhere.
the great resignation is a fact.
I call it the
And
great churn. Actually, it's not just the great
yeah,
resignation. It's
yeah, you're
almost
right.
like
And
it's
actually, what's happening is even worse in a sense. The more
yeah.
you peel the onion, you realize what's happening is a lot of people are actually now doing multiple jobs sitting at home. So,
Correct.
we have a large center in Bangalore, which is all tech, and there getting people to office has been about 10 times harder than getting them to Gurgaon. In fact, in Gurgaon, people have come. So
Acha.
between this last August and right up to January, in fact, even into December, late December, we ran up to 25, 30% occupancy every day, and people were happy to
Okay.
come. but not in
Okay.
Bangalore. So in
Not in
Bangalore, clearly techies are loath to come.
moonlighting.
Yeah, all kinds of stuff
No,
is
but
going
I think
on.
one of the themes I'll pick up later in the conversation is this also, that one of the things that COVID has left many companies with is how to do more with less. I think clearly,
Yeah,
middle
yeah,
management has
yeah,
been
yeah.
tightened up,
Sure,
and
sure,
really there is a whole organization change that people are bringing in by using digital tools and doing more with less. We'll pick that up. Let me move
for
on to
sure.
Damodar. Damodar, your business was affected in a very different manner, right? You had a surge of demand also at one level
Yeah.
kicking in, but your supply lines were blocked, right? Tell us about what happened in your business and how did the external environment change and how did the internal environment change?
So, Harish, as you said, the external environment change was visible to all of us.
Correct.
Uh, 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 Many things closed down. Nobody was prepared for it. All that is known. Uh, what happened in our case, being a supermarket business, uh, we couldn't blame the outside. We couldn't say malls are shut, travel is shut. In fact, the society expected a lot more out of us, and
Correct.
what was shut in our case was the supervision was shut
Uh-huh.
because of the lockdown. But our front end was open, and customers trusted us and depended that somehow we will keep the supply lines on. Uh, and very simple people work at the front end in retail. My
Mm-hmm.
store associates across the world, they are minimum wage people.
Mm-hmm.
And we found them finding a purpose. We found them saying, we will sleep in the store for by rotation so that we are able to keep the stores open. And we found customers coming down to volunteer at the stores because they knew that everybody would not be at the store. So such things happened, and we believe these things are the harvest that you get when you build a culture, that even without, I mean, it's said that how people behave when nobody is supervising is actually culture. So
Mm-hmm.
we saw that happen, and we just realized that uh, the drive and the purpose to service the customer, we don't need to contribute. It
Mm-hmm.
is innate, and our teams are doing it at the front end. They think they owe it to the society, which is a big thing. We just had to make sure we back them up. So the first thing we did was uh, uh, to make sure that whoever was coming to work at work, they were safe. And
Okay.
best practices came in, and we provided a cover of care and medical attention to not just those people, our employees, but to the entire family.
Mm-hmm.
So we said if they see that they have to go out and service our customers, we must serve them and keep them safer than their neighbors, give them access to, in case they need, everybody who is dependent on them, we must take care of them. So that's the thing that we did. And we simplified the supply lines because our customers that
Mm-hmm.
time said, you know, give me some atta, some milk, and some.
Correct. Give me the
So
basics, essentially.
so our entire pipe, we just made it drive only 50 items.
So okay, so Damodar, what I'm saying, crisis hits like this. How do you keep the communication? See, everything got that time got challenged. How do you communicate with the team? What were the, let's say, war room setup? Because I still want to dig in deeper as to, because externality, all of us will continue facing. This was a big shock, but
Yes.
these shocks come. Tomorrow when you have 10-minute grocery delivery coming, and suddenly $1 billion of capital flowing into it, there's a new externality to you, right? The 10-minute delivery is now going to become maybe table stakes in next 2 years, right? And you, of course, invested in Dunzo and all that, but I'm saying that will reconfigure the business. So, what happens at the time of sudden change to your organizational structure? How do you keep the communication lines open? What is the kind of simplification of, let's say, processes that you do internally?
So, like I said, I cut my things that were flowing through our supply lines down to 50, and whatever we were buying from farmers, because
Mm-hmm.
farmers were coming to us, that fresh produce we could flow through because we controlled the entire end to end there. We did that. Uh, the same thing we did with our vendors.
Mm-hmm.
And we said, your supply lines are broken, mine are broken, but I'm simplifying. You give me these three items and give me wherever you can.
Okay.
Internally in the group, daily hurdles were formed at each level,
Mm-hmm.
including the topmost leadership in the group to make sure. Fortunately, we are our cousin business is Geo,
Mm-hmm.
and therefore uh, there were no supply lines broken there, and we could really put in place communication mechanisms and also internal apps
Mm-hmm.
where every family member of every employee was reporting their symptoms every
Mm-hmm.
day, uh,
Okay.
so that our medical team at the center actually had enough data points, and they could
Mm-hmm.
tell us that things are looking bad in Orissa. In the next 4 days, Orissa will be in trouble. Up the
Mm-hmm.
ante in terms of safety measures in Orissa, because they were getting data from within our
From the
system.
team.
So that's the way
Okay.
things changed internally at the time of the crisis. But
Mm-hmm.
the real big thing that happened was when we saw our store teams responding to delivering orders home to people.
Mm-hmm.
And they're doing it on Google Forms and WhatsApp and what have you.
Oh, so they
We
innovated
found
on their own, or what did they do?
they innovated on their own completely. And
Mm-hmm.
when we found that in our communication channels, the little sophisticated pilots that we had in various corners of the country for GeoMart, we just said, collapse the pilot.
Mm-hmm.
If
Okay.
the customer wants necessities, customer wants it at home,
Mm-hmm.
and we shall do it. And therefore, uh, we were like a complete startup, and we said in 3 weeks time, from nothing, we said we will launch GeoMart and deliver home to people. So there were no fulfillment centers, there
Mm-hmm.
was no app,
Mm-hmm.
uh, there were no processes for picking, packing, but we said the market wants it, and our front end team believes that this has to be done.
Mm-hmm.
So GeoMart was launched like that, and then being Reliance, we said uh, every city and every store of ours is a complete market in itself. So why
Correct.
launch it in one corner? So we launched it in 198 cities simultaneously.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It,
Okay.
but I think the it was a holy mess. Obviously, it will be. But we said the customer will forgive if they see us trying hard,
Correct. Yeah.
uh, and it's okay to take a bit of a bashing in the process. So two things happened. One, GeoMart became the biggest footprint grocery provider in the country almost overnight, and second, our stores turned omni-channel
Overnight.
overnight in a
Without
flip.
you pushing it down from the top. Actually, one of the big,
So
yeah, I think
yeah,
that's
so
the big
so
story here as
yeah,
well.
the
That
the trigger came from the store. We just provided the platform,
perfect.
and people talk a lot of strategy, saying physical, digital, etc. In one stroke, all our
The whole
stores became
organization
omni-channel,
switched.
omni-channel. So I think
So
some
what I
of
can
these
hear from
things.
both of you is that culture, in a sense, if your culture is fluid enough, I'm using a vague word because culture itself is a vague word, so therefore I'm forgiven for that. But if you allow your culture to be fluid and you build the culture is like a glue, and therefore when it's hit hard, if it can bend and not break, I think that's what I'm hearing. What Deep talked about, how his team came together, and what I'm seeing from your end as well, that if you empower people and they feel comfortable and aligned, then they come together and actually innovate and bring things forward on their own, right? It's not, it's almost you're able to give birth to a new organization structure through a crisis actually. Deep, let come back to
Yeah.
you. What are the crises, what came or what do you see that's changed in the way your teams work and handle customers, and what opportunity did they see in the last 2 years? Let's leave the third wave out for a moment because we're back into another crisis mode, but I'm sure things changed in the last 2 years. What were they?
Yeah, I think firstly, to the last point you made, Harish, I couldn't overemphasize that. I think if one has a culture where people believe that they're co-owners in the business and this is theirs, then instead of flight, there is fight. And I
Hmm.
think that's what I saw a lot of people saying, hey, listen, we're going to fight this. Obviously, from the top, it was easy to give the messages that we had seen in 21 years. You know, we both, you and I, have about seen that time in the internet when nothing was happening. We were all packing up our bags and saying India is not going to happen early 2000 till 2005 and all. But I think to say that and then to have people genuinely believe that, there's a big difference. So that's important, and I think it's a big lesson for the younger companies today, or for our students who'll set up companies, etc., or even join companies, that they want to believe that they are part of that company's mission. And if they see that being reciprocated, then it's very important. Then you're in a good space. So if you're the kind of person who's entrepreneurial, and you
Hmm.
land up in a company which is also entrepreneurial, which wants to give you a lot more to do, and wants you to be part of crisis management in whatever way, then you've got a
Hmm.
great fit going. So I just thought it's important because
So, no,
we're at a
absolutely. I think
management
there is no
school. And
reason why students should not be entrepreneurs anymore. I mean, there's no need of a standard job anymore. The things are
yeah,
moving too
yeah,
fast.
yeah,
I think that's one of the
yeah.
lessons we're all seeing from all around.
Yeah, and coming to your specific question, I think we realized fairly quickly, of course, this new way of working. So there is going to be a lot of working from home. Most of our businesses we can do from home, frankly,
Hmm.
thankfully.
Hmm.
Not everything, but most of it we can do. Where we couldn't do, then we were encouraging people to meet in very different ways after the lockdown. So meet outdoors. Some of us would
Hmm.
catch up if we were in the same city, catch up for walks with masks, etc., or do outdoor meetings between wave one and wave two. We did a leadership team offsite, open air, overnight, but all the meetings were held in open air in good Delhi weather kind of thing. So I think you made the most of it, but the customer needs clearly started to change.
Hmm.
So the safety aspect became the most important thing. Actually, in surveys that we did, it became more important than price for the first time.
Hmm.
There's a common saying in travel, and maybe it's true for retail also, for everything also, that the first three most important factors are price, price, and price. So in travel also, because you're going on a
Correct.
certain airline, or
Same. You're getting
you'll
the
stay in
same
the same
standard
hotel.
product.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
price, price, price becomes, although we all of us want to change it to your experience, etc., etc. But price is super important, and that's why I'm just kind of making the point that changed. Safety became the most important. So people said, listen, price doesn't matter. Where will I be safe? So when the wave abated and people started moving out a bit, the first thing that started changing is people said, we need to get out. We are tired of being locked in. We are the kind of people who used to be out every second weekend. We are either a ding couple or a yuppie family or whatever else, and we can't stay. Our summer holidays have gone, our spring holidays have gone, all that. So people said we will drive out. And
Hmm.
driving became the safety norm, whether it was ex Bombay, whether it was ex Delhi, ex Bangalore, ex,
Correct.
every big city. And otherwise, people were saying they're happy to drive. So,
Hmm.
but now where will we go and stay? We don't want to stay in a typical big box hotel because
Correct.
in a big box hotel, we are scared that this thing will carry. And there were many,
Exposure, in a way.
and there were also misconceptions about how it spreads, etc.
Correct.
Right or wrong, some said air conditioning, some said this, the other was exposure. So fundamentally, people said we want to be in a place either which is very spread out, so like a resort where we have
Hmm.
independent villas, or
Hmm.
even better, we want to be in a homestay.
Hmm.
So find us a homestay. And no one says this. They don't put a billboard out. It's for us to pick up these insights, right? That is our
Correct.
job. It became pretty clear this is now going to become the kind of mainstay of what people want in accommodation. So
Hmm.
while we were already offering homestays at that point of time, a few thousand, it was always a side thing. It was for the people who were more adventurous. Now it
Hmm.
became mainstream. So very
Hmm.
quickly we doubled up our force there, actually moved a lot of people from the hotel side into the alternate
With
accommodation
some
or
kind
the
of little more uncontrolled experience. I know. I mean, homestay is but the market is a little. I mean, the
yeah,
service challenges would be of a different order, right?
of course,
Hotels are
of
at least
course.
standardized, branded.
No, you're right. So the first thing we had to do was also to bulk up the number of homestays we had. So we went
Hmm.
from about 3,000 to over 10,000 rapidly because we deployed our hotel teams to work on homestay options. We knew where they were. Then
Hmm.
we started taking a lot of pictures and doing actual visits so that we
Okay.
could put the content out with a lot of confidence, veracity that this is what you'll get. So I think
Hmm.
we tried to solve the trust deficit through that manner. A lot of the places had either caretakers who could give you services, or they were now also open to working with service providers. So, in some
As
sort
a
of way, we
yeah.
started to also work with
Okay.
that ecosystem and get service providers also to come in and say, hey, can you service this group
Hmm.
of these 20 or 30 properties which are up in the hill, let's say in Shimla? But
Hmm.
they would like a cook to come in every day and make something for them once a day, and they would like cleaning once a day. So can you actually do that? Similarly, there was these things were mushrooming and springing up in different places.
So you were doing the partnership? You were
We were,
helping the
yes,
ecosystem?
yes,
Okay.
exactly. And we were highlighting the need and the demand for this because the service
Hmm.
provider was there, but they didn't realize that it's going to become a massive thing.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that became one of the big things, and I think we understood that customer need well. When it came to even traveling to normal hotels, there was need to standardize what needs to be done and some kind of accreditation.
Hmm.
So we made a program which we actually called, which is My Assure kind of program, which was about the assurance that you
Hmm.
will get. This is
Hmm.
assured that you will get these five things.
Hmm.
These are sanitized regularly after every stay. There's a hygiene check done on the basic things. Vaccination was not around in the first wave, so people couldn't be
Right.
vaccinated, but our staff is tested regularly, etc., etc. All those things
Okay.
were there. And then we gave that stamp of approval that these are places which are safe for you to go.
So how is
And
it looking now? In a sense, how do you see this whole thing playing out? In the short term, of course, we hope this wave will subside, but eventually, do you think there's a fundamental shift in how business travel and personal and family travel is going to take place over the next few years? And therefore, how that
undoubted,
will impact your business and how does it change your, let's say, priority or where you put your money and resources?
undoubtedly, Arish. So it is very clear that these are some changes which are secular. They are not going to go back.
Hmm.
Maybe sometimes it takes a shock for people to
Hmm.
move online, just like Damodar explained how GeoMart was born and how GeoMart took off. Sometimes you need that catalyst. So I
Hmm.
think homestays are here to stay. Pun unintended, they're definitely here to stay. It's a very massive wave. Today, you go onto our platforms, both Make My Trip, Go Ibibo, you'll see it as separate tabs and
Okay.
also interspersed as hotels. So they are here to stay for sure.
Hmm.
Driving and shorter breaks are happening, as
Hmm.
are very interestingly the workcation kind of trip,
Longer
which is
holidays.
very clear. This is not a holiday, guys. I
Uh-huh.
am able to move my base because my company is saying it's okay to work from home. I don't want to work in my small home wherever I've got, or we are either bored or it's too small. We are
Hmm.
taking a cottage up in the hills. We are taking something in, Alibag and Lonavala
Hmm.
and different parts of the country. And luckily, our internet connectivity in India might be among the finest in the world. So
Absolutely.
people are working from everywhere, and this became a very common thing. So we are also playing in that segment. So these are secular changes. Business travel is clearly the worst hit, and
Hmm.
large businesses are actually taking even longer to come back, particularly multinationals and large businesses, because head office has declared, "Hey, listen, we're going to be working from home, etc. We're not risking anyone." However, businesses that need feet on street,
Hmm.
businesses where you need to visit your channel, your distributors, your retailers, your stockists, your CNF agents, you need to be visiting them. So whether you're a Levers or a Nestle or a Colgate, you're out there doing this, and all the pharma companies, etc. We found them come back pretty fast after the first wave because
Okay. So
business
their
had
teams
been
are out
lost.
in the field. Okay.
Business had been lost. You had to reclaim your business. You had to come back for your territory, and
Hmm.
interestingly, there was demand. So
Hmm.
we've all seen the economy has actually been quite resilient in
Correct.
coming back.
Correct.
The
Yeah.
channels
Yeah.
have changed, but
Yeah.
fundamentally people are saying, okay, yeah, now I'll consume at home,
Need to
whatever I
get
can
back,
consume.
consume more.
Correct.
Yeah.
And when
Yeah.
the wave abates, then I'm up and about.
Yeah.
So we are
Back.
seeing that in travel as well.
Okay. So let me move to Damodar. Damodar, I think one of the things that happened, and we talked about the shock with Deep. The fact is that earlier companies used to have to try and build a digital habit with consumers. I'm sure Deep has seen it for 20 years, trying to get people to book online, book their hotels online, book tickets move much faster, airline tickets. But hotels has been a struggle in the travel industry. With COVID, we all saw a new situation emerge where the consumer is more digital native than most companies actually. They want to find product on digital paths. They want to, see the product on their phones. They want to press an order, pay online, and just get the job done. How is that behavior manifesting in your? I mean, what are the changes you're seeing with that, and how that's going to impact your segment of retailing? And more specifically, I think a lot of the audience here is interested in whether 10-minute grocery retailing is a business model or not, whether it'll make money. So we'll come back to that later. But Mila, just tell us what's changed in the consumer's head, and therefore that what changes will drive for your sector.
First, the way Deep mentioned,
Uh,
a lot of people were consuming a lot more at home
mm-hmm,
because they couldn't entertain. So I'm in the business of consumption at home,
mm-hmm.
and my biggest competition was actually closed, which is
Correct.
consumption out of home.
Out of home. Correct.
So So we found the pie increasing of
Hmm.
consumption at home, also premiumizing because food at home
You
became
want better
apart
stuff.
from
You want better stuff
apart
because you were not going out to
and
eat, right? You're saving so much on the
yeah.
restaurant bill at that time, actually.
Correct. So the money was, and well, I'm talking about supermarket consumers. So these are higher LSM consumers. Their incomes were not really impacted significantly for
Correct.
them to make those cuts. So, but they were entertainment starved. They were eating out starved. So a lot of
Hmm.
experimentation happened. Food at home became entertainment, camaraderie, show off on social media. All that happened. For us,
Hmm.
that translated into premiumization. So that's the
Correct.
fundamental. Uh, so that's the consumption habit. So
Hmm.
it became a positive problem for us to, and we had to go back to companies and said, tell them, please, your pasta
Supply.
line, I want
Yeah.
it running.
I want more
Uh,
pasta. I want more sauces. I want more,
correct, yeah.
okay.
So that's on the consumption side. On the shopping side, yes, people discovered going digital, developing the ability to go digital, developing that comfort uh, uh, faster than ever before. But we found, these waves have been coming and going, and we found uh, it's settling as a
No, but
habit.
let me ask you a question. Like, imagine if you were a banker, I would ask you, if you got 10 branches in Mumbai, do you need to have a 11th one? I'm assuming that you're covered. Does it make sense to really come up with a new business model in retail? And I'm saying we shouldn't take this point to its illogical extreme that we'll always need store. Of course, you'll
No,
always
I
need
don't.
store.
I don't need an analogy. I will talk about whether I am adding stores or not.
Yes, exactly. Coming to that. Yeah.
I am adding stores, physical stores in
Okay.
big markets and small markets,
Okay.
like there is no tomorrow.
Okay. So these stores are going
Because
to be what's going to change in these stores from the past?
no, no. First and foremost, why the stores?
Hmm.
I think Deep also touched upon it. There are two costs now. There is money cost and there is contact cost in the
Hmm.
mind of the customer.
Hmm.
Now, organized sector stores are safer places. Uh, they see better practices prevailing compared to the hurly burly of the Indian bazaar.
Hmm.
So they become safer places. They become places where you can go. You know there is nobody else picking up the product for you. You are picking it up, and it's coming out. So your relative contact risk is lower. Nobody's being allowed without the check of the temperature, and there is sanitization. So the inside the store you feel safer. So that
Hmm.
cost for the customer comes down even when they're shopping physically. And like I said, all our
But
stores
equally,
are now
Kirana has made a comeback. No, Damodar, the fact is that Kirana, when I couldn't access a mall or a store or whatever, my Kirana guy took extreme care of me. I mean, in a sense, he got me product when it
absolutely
wasn't available. He gave me credit. Not that I needed, but in a sense, he made life easy. Pay me online, pay me cash, don't pay me now, pay me later. So I think there was
correct.
a wave of moving away from Kirana, which has probably come back. Where does it stand in this whole equation now?
No, I think the modernization of Kirana, like we talk about consumers, the Kirana is
Hmm.
also a simple fellow.
Hmm.
So digital hesitancy prevailed there as well.
Hmm.
Yeah. Why do I take payment digitally? Because if I take payment digitally, वो पैसा एक नंबर में आ जाता है.
Correct.
I'm better off old methods. So those were the resistances which all went away.
Vanished, went away.
People put their WhatsApp numbers on their billboard on their shop boards so
Yeah.
that people could order. I think the digital modernization of the Kirana is almost underreported, if I may say. It was a big change
Yeah.
that happened, and we see this because in our new commerce business we deal with them and we
Hmm.
support when they modernize digitally or physically or the way they source their products. So I think everybody moved up the modernity channel. The consumer, the shopper, all of us who are providers, including the Kirana stores, and newer entrepreneurs, meaning apparel store owners, moved to having food stores because food seemed to be the
Big,
one
big
business that was
opportunity.
going on, going
Yeah,
on.
yeah.
So a lot of capital coming in there.
So how do you see it playing out? In a sense, we're seeing this whole, let's say, up trading on the digital front for everybody. The consumer is happier digital. The Kirana store has modernized to that degree. Modern trade has become only channel. And now you've got funding into Zepto, and Swiggy is doing Instamart, and you bought invested in Dunzo, and there is Big Basket with Tata now. What's the, there seems to be one like kind of cauldron of competition now that's again beginning, right? In a sense, everything is being thrown into the mix because there is no way that you cannot be available digitally as well, right? Eventually, it'll all come down to who wins by creating consumer habit, meeting customer expectations, but those are changing rapidly. So one first question on 10-minute grocery. Let's get that out of the way. A lot of people want to hear that. What's your sense there?
No, I think it's got to do with if you have to ask yourself the customer
Because my
question. See,
my, my grocer already gives me in 10 minutes. I don't have to do anything. I pick up the
yeah,
phone, he recognizes my voice. I
which
don't
is
have to give him the address, and his
which is
payment is taken digitally. So,
which is what I'm saying. I think
hmm
the always when you think of which model will work, go back to the shopper
hmm
and see her behavior. Yeah. So we know that there is a bunch of things the customer wants in the morning. First thing in the
hmm
morning, there is a
correct.
bunch of things that are required. Puja ke phool chahiye, you want your idli dosa batter, you want your nariyal pani, you want your milk and bread
Milk
and
and eggs
eggs
and
and things.
bread. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So if you can build a model to solve that or participate in that digitally, you have a habit which is supporting. Yeah.
hmm
Uh, then people plan for the week. Then
Gotcha.
people plan for the month. If you're
Mm.
solving those things, then you know the consumer behavior. Now,
hmm
uh, uh, there is another thing which is being invented and everybody is trying that you mentioned, which is what I call that urge shopping.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think about it and I want it. Now, you have to ask yourself, is that the way kitchens are run by people who are family customers? Is that the way Indian kitchens run? Or is
hmm
that the way people shop that they think of something कि अभी खाना बनाना है 10 minutes later I want something if if that is not then what gets bought for 10 and 20 minutes and if so
And how much margin
who
does it leave on the table?
margin आजकल जरूरत नहीं पड़ती है वैसे
अच्छा
as long
नहीं.
as long as you have the consumer
No,
as
but
a
equally, let
customer.
me give you a counter example. There is a pizza company whose pizza may not be great, but the 30-minute promise has made it the super stock of decades, right? Domino's has outbeaten any returns of Apple, Amazon, any company because this idea that you wrap a promise very carefully. So it's 10 minutes that's being sold. Now, how they attack whether it's actually 10, whether it becomes 20, whether they say, okay, if you want it in 1 hour, we'll give you 50 rupees more coupon. You see, they can transform this thing. But really, what you're doing is moving consumption behavior using impulse and saying, okay, now here are all your morning goods available. And whether I deliver them in 10 minutes or not becomes moot. But essentially, you rise above the idea that you don't need to call up a Kirana guy, your shopping list is already ready, press a button and you get it home. I'm saying, is there because equally then you'll have to justify your investment in Dunzo as well. Clearly, we headed to a situation where consumers want things quickly with high certainty and high quality at home, right?
No, we are headed to a situation where the consumer is spoiled for choice,
hmm
and all of us are in a hurry and in a competitive hurry to throw those choices at her, and all of us will learn the
hmm
point where the consumer model and the business model they both meet at the same place because that's only when
that happens.
that match happens long in the long run
You create value.
you generate a business but we will all learn on that front what might happen if you want to speculate in that
Yeah,
one what is it that you will want in an hour then it comes out that I want fresh food, fresh products in an hour.
correct.
I want the sabzi bhaji for the evening meal, and
In an
it can
hour.
come in an hour or 2 hours. But I think about it in the morning, and it's good if it comes in the afternoon.
hmm
So then you have to say, I'm a fresh food specialist, and what's more, I am a delivery specialist. So you got to know your pizza well, and
And you need to,
after you know your pizza well, you got to add the 30 minute if it's possible. You
and
if
you're clear
you
that the fresh business is a different business. Its dynamics change completely,
So,
right?
so I'm saying you're asking me to think and share how my
Yeah.
mind is currently working. I'm doing so. So I
hmm
think that's where it might sit well with the consumer. But I'm leaving no segment uncontested. Yeah, because
hmm
I'm a full consumption player. Therefore,
Mm-hmm.
I am doing kirana, I am doing supermarkets, I am doing
You're across the
e-commerce.
chain.
E-commerce, I'm doing morning 7 o'clock delivery with milk basket, and I'm participating in the quick commerce opportunity as well.
So
But to claim that,
what worries you at night? Suppose 2 o'clock in the night you wake up in a sweat. What is the biggest thing you worry about?
no, I don't wake up in the morning at 2 o'clock with a sweat. But I'll tell you what amuses me, or
Hmm.
is the share of discussion and the share of mind of digital shopping in groceries
Compared
is
to the size.
is 100x more than the share of market. Yeah,
Yeah.
my I think why I sleep well is my back foot is anchored in solid,
Solid.
proven, and rapidly expanding physical presence.
Okay.
And on that, I'm riding this. I believe digital consumers, new recruits into digital consumption will happen through groceries.
Okay.
Therefore, I'm doing assisted e-commerce in my
Hmm.
physical stores. I'm telling people, come, let me teach you how to
So the
order.
relationship is controlled at the store level in a sense. Okay. Okay.
But what we know from data is when the customer is buying physically and digitally both from me,
Huh.
that home is buying that home is buying 35% more from me. So my
Okay.
share of
Fantastic.
consumption grows up. So I'm freely.
Fantastic.
So it's not about whether it is physical or digital. It's about am I
The
relevant for
relationship with the store.
and am I relevant for the
Which is
consumer
the
very
preference?
soon?
Are you the preferred brand or not? Okay, we're
That's
gonna
right.
run out of time very quickly. Thanks so much, Damodar. Let me go to Deep. Deep, do you wake up at 2 a.m. in the night in a sweat?
Thankfully not. Yeah. So I think the one thing that experience teaches you, the biggest advantage of being around so long is that you've seen so many storms
Hmm.
that you know this too will pass if you will do your basics right. So I think
And that if a good night's sleep is the best way to begin a
what are you going to
business
do
at the
at
morning.
what are you going to
Yeah,
do at two
exactly.
in the morning anyway? So I mean,
Okay.
you can't do much. So I think that impulsiveness or that thing that you must jump into something right now and all. Yeah, sometimes you don't sleep till then because you're thinking of a good idea, which is fine, and
Hmm.
you're elaborating your idea. That's great. But I think you have to put those blocks in process, just pretty
Hmm.
much like Damodar was saying. Things start actually then functioning
Hmm.
on their
How do you
own.
pull the team back to basics? One of the challenges is that aligning the team and, actually even Damodar was saying that you come back and watch the consumer, what they want. And I think that makes a difference between a great company and a good company. I think the great company is constantly looking to learn from what the consumer is doing and how they're changing and trying to shape themselves again and again. But doing that for, you have Damodar has 50,000 people. You said you have 4,000 people, right? How do you get this whole thing going? And that's going to be my last question because,
Sure, sure. So for me, even pre-pandemic, Harish, it's been actually always about spending a very large amount of time personally. I think it's
hmm
a bit of learning or teaching by osmosis here, because
hmm
if personally you're spending a very serious chunk of your time listening to consumers
hmm
or pushing for consumer labs and then attending all the consumer labs and then being really interested in what is coming out of each one and then distilling that and saying, hey, maybe this is what we should be connecting the dots. This is what it means, because again,
hmm
consumers don't tell you I want this.
correct.
They give you vague
Signals.
sounds,
Yeah. Yeah.
noises, signals, and you have to synthesize and make sense
Decide for
out of
them.
them.
Yeah.
So if you're going to do it yourself and it's part of your where you spend your time every month, I'd say every week you don't do a consumer lab, but in every month, if you are going to give 1 to 2 days listening to consumers, and secondly, being genuinely bothered about customer feedback,
hmm
then I think people understand that this is very important. So
Okay. The
youngsters
CEO
who join.
himself is the signal of, you're the main customer care officer in that sense. That you care about what's
Absolutely,
happening. Okay.
absolutely, and rightly or wrongly, I think that is the case with us, and which is
hmm
fine. It's perfectly
hmm
okay. Of course, you get riled up, and things happen when you hear all these kind of things. But getting anyone in the consumer business knows getting feedback is a privilege. The
Absolutely.
moment you stop getting feedback or you lock
They're
yourself from
walking away
feedback,
silently.
you don't know. In fact,
We don't know.
consumers who tell you either, of course, they are genuinely aggrieved, they need something back, or they care. So I'm
Correct.
very happy to listen to them, and I'm very happy to say, okay, what are we going to do so that we don't make the same mistakes again? Also, we should be able to solve those problems at scale, which
Mm-hmm.
means with technology. There's no other way.
Mm-hmm.
You can't keep
Okay.
throwing people at these kind of issues. And for us, most of our product ideas actually come out of what consumers are telling us, not necessarily what I
Mm.
think is a great idea or someone else. So
Okay.
it's a
Perfect.
simple mantra, and
Thanks,
that's
Deep.
the way we do it.
I'll now talk Damodar 2 minutes on your sense. How
Yeah.
do you keep your signal antennas going? Of course, you've
Okay, I
written two
think
books on the subject, so
yeah.
you're the
No, so yeah, so I'll tell you what has changed. The entrepreneur in we are a very large group at Reliance.
yeah.
The entrepreneur in our chairman was always far more agile, audacious, and in a startup mode even at this level.
Mm-hmm.
But the organization, as it became large, developed inertia, developed its own friction, etc. What has happened is this crisis
Has
has
galvanized.
has got the elephant to dance.
Okay. Okay.
The Mahout always wanted the elephant to
Ah.
dance
Okay.
more, but
Yeah.
I think that has happened. And people like me who were outliers, meaning
Mm-hmm.
for letting consumers know on social media that this is the business I run and you can reach out to me. That was
Mm-hmm.
considered not a thing done. Now it's
Mm-hmm.
become mainstream.
Okay.
So, so I think that
Fantastic.
will help
Fantastic.
us. Yeah.
So thank you very much. I guess this discussion could have gone on for hours, and but we have to hand over to Kavi now. Thanks, Damodar, and thanks, Deep. I'm sure the students will pick up a lot from the conversation, and I'm sure Kavi will pick it up now. Thank you so much. We've run over
Thank you,
time again.
Harish. Lovely
See you
chatting.
guys soon.
Thank
Lovely
you.
chat. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks, Deep. Thanks, Harish.
Thanks,
Thanks.
Daman.
Thanks. Bye. Bye.
Thank you, Harish. It's always a pleasure listening to you, and it's a great conversation. I always thought change is catalyzed by big events, and COVID has catalyzed change like none else. And it's fantastic listening to both Deep and Damodar and you speaking about it. And I've read somewhere about risk is what is left over when you think you've thought of everything else. I think people had thought that they had thought of everything else, and there came COVID. And I quite liked what Damodar ended it with, which is about the Mahout and the elephant. And suddenly there is a new dance in town, and all of us are dancing to a different tune. Now, let's get the connected art from Santosh. That's something that we're going to bring up here. And as that art comes up, this is I would encourage you to use the icon right on top, on your top right hand corner, which can kind of help it go full screen for you just to see all of what was on Santosh's mind as he brought this up. And it's a very interesting piece of conversation that's happened between the three gentlemen, and that's fantastic. And as that conversation was happening, I was quite interested and quite intrigued by another which was happening on the sidelines, which was happening in the chat window, which I'm just going to read it out. It was an open conversation. So here it goes. There was Ajit Rangnekar, the former dean of ISB, saying, responding to Deep about employees moonlighting in Bangalore. He said, while we can blame employees for moonlighting, let us recognize that companies are encouraging people to moonlight for them. How do we get industry to be more principled? In Satish Pradhan, one of my favorite HR gurus, answers that saying, Ajit, maybe we need to emphasize access to capability rather than owning them as exclusive assets. In Ajit's response, yes, Satish, a long time ago, Dilip Rangnekar had warned that this generation will be multi-company service providers, and we should develop our practices to fit their beliefs. Technology and work from home just accelerated it. And Dean Professor Ranjan Banerjee put a bow on all of those, saying some time ago Charles Handy spoke of the elephant and the flea would sit on the back of multiple elephants in a day. Interesting sets of conversations which are happening in the chat window, and that's one of the reasons why the chat window becomes extremely important for us to keep focusing on and keep contributing to it as well. Because once we all start contributing to the chat window, there is an interesting conversation on the sidelines, which helps us process what's coming from the stage. Thank you. And let's get this picture away and let's bring the students in. We've got two very bright students back amongst us. And we also have Avantika Tomar, who is a visiting faculty at BitSOM, who's also here with us. So Avantika and the students here, I'm going to turn it over to you and ask you, what did you pick up from this conversation so far?
Sure. So let me go first, and then Rohan and Vitika can certainly add. But I think both from this conversation as well as the previous one around globalization and what have I learned from the pandemic, I think as a faculty and as someone who teaches quite regularly, Kavi, all of these themes are just as relevant in education as they are in e-commerce and hotels, hospitality, tourism, like we were talking, right? So much has changed. We've been all forced to become strategic. We've been forced to become agile. We've been forced to become digital. And I always say this that, and I hope the students agree, but while the pendulum right now is right on the opposite end where everything is online, all our assignments, exams, lectures, even the way I interact with students, either one-on-one or one-to-many, it's all online at the moment. So while right now it certainly seems like that the pendulum is all the way to the right, it will swing back, Kavi. It will come back, but it will never go all the way to the left. That's certainly something that I can see from an education standpoint. Again, I'm sure Rohan, Vitika, there are experiences that you have as students. I would love to hear kind of what you took away, but also what you think about my wonderful pendulum going right to left.
Yeah, if I can go first, I think we just concluded a course on consumer behavior last week, and this was a very live experience of actual case studies which have gone from 20 years and how they've evolved, how they're evolving. So I think to hear that and to listen to how they are thinking about change and how they have actually executed that change was great in that sense. I think one of my key takeaways, as in the things that I liked the most, was um, how the bottom up approach that Mr. Mal shared, where the people at the soul level could really help create for them a strategy that they could then execute, right? And for me that is very reassuring, right? Because I would be starting off post MBA in a world where uh, for leaders to hear what I have to say, for leaders to um, take my ideas into consideration and also execute them, really helps me go much more into confidence into that space. I'll hand over to Vitika. I think she'll add on to this.
Ritika,
So,
yes, go on. Yes, please. Yeah.
yeah, so
Give us a little bit of background about yourself. A one-line introduction and then kick off, please. Thank you.
yeah, so hi everyone, I'm Vitika, and currently I'm a part of the founding batch. And we have been working for this management fest for over a week, planning everything with the founding fuel team, and it's been really exciting every day. So yeah, so today it was great. I mean, it was such a candid insight on how businesses who were at the front end during the pandemic adopted transformation, and it was great that these leaders were reflecting on on their experiences with such resilience. So when Damodar sir said that the drive to serve the customer comes from within, and it's innate and it's something that is harvested over the years with the culture. That is something that I greatly resonated with, and I think that is one key takeaway that I'm going to take in whenever any organization I'm going to work. Then he shared one anecdote where they built GeoMart so fast in a situation of adversity. So from the last session where we talked about how going deep tech uh, is going to take 3-4 years to now talking about something uh, building fast in adversity. So we have to be adaptable to the situation is something which I've learned. And yeah, I mean, the stories of Kirana stores have been really heart touching. This is something which is a part of my personal experience as well. How the way they've handled the customer really inspires us and showed us that how customers should be handled. The way they remember small things about every order that we make monthly and how quickly they adopt it digitally. I think is something which is very inspiring, and it's great that how big companies are thinking about empowering them and including them in their business model.
Okay, thank you, Ritika. Rohan, a question for you. The question is, so what are you planning to do from any of these insights that have come up? Anything that you think you want to at this stage? You just heard of all these ideas that's come from the Bitsom Ideas Festival. So, is there anything at all that strikes you that you should go forward and think about, or even experiment with? What do you want to do?
Uh, Thanks a lot, Kavi. I think that's a very interesting question. I find myself reflecting a lot on that. And I think hearing all these leaders, especially today, there are two things that I would definitely want to stay on top of it. So one is being agile, right? So being constantly on the lookout of not being attached with a particular idea, not being attached with okay, I can do what is the best for my company or organization or any kind of project that I'm working on, but to listen, adapt, and then execute. And the second thing is on the leadership style. There was a session yesterday that we had where Mr. Molly has touched so many different people who are stalwarts in their industry, and how that leadership translated into their kind of approach and behavior towards their employees, and which was also something that we could learn from both Mr. Mal and Mr. Kalra today in terms of backing people, right? So the idea that we need to back people, back their ideas, and try and create a culture which is where they feel ownership to the idea and to the organization. I think that is something that as a future leader I want to take with me.
Okay, Ritika, for you, what is something that you want to go out and do differently?
I think ability to understand consumer. I think Sir mentioned that they give signals and noises, and from that you have to understand what they really want, and instead of spoiling them with choices, distinguish that how their needs can be addressed. So that is one thing that I'm going to adopt.
Oh, okay, thank you. Avantika, you are someone who's working very closely with the founding batch at Bitsom, and you also have a very wide, diverse perspective on many other domains from your hat as a consultant, because when you wear that hat as a consultant, what do you think is, because you fit right in there, and because between two different generations of thought, what are the connecting bridges which will hold these two generations together? What are your views over there?
Yeah, so I think absolutely. So one thing, Kavi, that I completely agree with Rohan and Vitika on is, listening more than talking, and which is, listen to your consumer. In my case, as a faculty at Bitsom, I'm definitely trying to listen more as students share what they are looking for, as opposed to, emphasizing how I think the world should be viewed, because the world has clearly changed so much, right? But I think the greater bridge, according to me, is certainly an iterative approach, right? And I think both Deep and Damodar were talking about it, that you can't find that one size fits all kind of a solution. So be iterative, plan short, fail fast, move forward, right? So I think that I feel is certainly a nice bridge between the top down and the bottom up, right? And that's where you kind of can meet if you're adopting a very iterative style, whether it is for me as a faculty, or whether it is me as a consultant, or whether it is somebody designing the new under 10-minute delivery, which obviously was a very, very hot topic in the chat window as well.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Avantika. We are out of time, and we are getting into a very interesting session ahead. Thank you, Rohan. Thank you, Vritika. It's very interesting to hear a very different intergenerational viewpoint while being bridged by Avantika, who will also come back along with me at the end of this session. But the next session is going to be something very special. And I will not speak too much about it because I am going to hand it over to Dean Ranjan Banerjee, who will take you on a checkered board, so to speak. So if you are on AirMeet, you may have to end this session and sign in to the next session. And we will see you at the end of the next session. You're going to see how an innovator's journey of staying relevant has far-reaching victories that it has provided for a gentleman from whom we can all learn. Over to Professor Dean Ranjan Banerjee. May I request, if you're on AirMeet, please end the session and join in on to the next session. For now, we're signing off. We'll see you at the end of the next session.